Hey, hey, hey.
Hey,
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
good evening again.
Good to see y'all made it despite the frigid cold. No, I ain't talking to you down in Florida down there.
It's frigid
Just
to
us
us
up here
too.
suffering. Yeah, it's all of 40 degree or 45 degrees down there. You're not getting much sympathy from us up here. The high is going to be 1 degree on Sunday.
Ooh,
One. At least we get a degree.
Barely.
We're we're gonna
barely.
we're gonna set about 3 records in the next 2 days, I think, in
Remember,
this
it's global.
world. Yeah, in the middle of the worst global warming year in history, depending on where you pull your numbers from, I guess we're going to be setting deep freeze records.
By the way, did you hear that some of the numbers, I think it was in New York and some other places, from the 1930s, they actually went back, altered the records to lower those temperature numbers so that this past year
Won't break a record.
would look hotter than it was. They altered the old records. And I thought, wow, you talk about evil. Anyway,
When there's that much money on the line, you'll do just about anything, I guess.
yeah. Yeah. Well, this little story I want to tell um, this evening is a nice, simple one. It's called Warm Milk. In a home in the Ozark Mountains of southern Missouri, a 98-year-old great grandmother is lay dying, and her daughters are around her bed and trying to make her last journey positive, comfortable. They tried to give her some warm milk, but she just didn't taste right. She just couldn't get it down. She just, at that point, she didn't want to eat anything, just wanted to kind of fade away. One of the kids took the glass back to the kitchen, remembering that they got a gift of a bottle of Irish wine that had been received, really special. They opened it and they poured quite a bit of it into the warm milk. So, back at the grandmother's bed, they held the glass to her lips, and the frail lady drank a little. Then her eyes brightened. She drank a little more. Then she drank a little more than she had before. She finished the whole glass down to the last drop. As her eyes brightened, the ladies thought it would be a good opportunity to have one last talk with their spiritual leader. They said, Grandma, please give us some of your wisdom before you pass on to the next life. And she said very clearly, don't sell that cow.
Oh my!
I know it's old and corny. What can I say? As news events, we got something from Carolyn here in Missouri. She got this from WorldNet Daily, we believe, worldnetdaily.com. It shows a picture of J.K. Rowling holding a Bible, and the Bible says Holy Bible by J.K. Rowling. They believe it's the latest marketing coup by Pope Francis. He hired the famous, writer of the Harry Potter children's books to author a rewrite of the Bible that would entice young people. Don't you think that's significant?
I think it's blasphemous.
Maybe she'll
Yeah,
maybe she'll introduce a new character.
Yeah, a bunch of new characters. And her books are all about the occult, demons and witches, and well, anyway, it just I guess it's marketing, but it's marketing without, what would you call it? Spiritual quality control.
yeah. It's just sheer marketing. He just wants to push his or their agenda. They want to get it. They want to get as many people drawn in as they can. They're opening it up for the homosexuals, the non-Catholics. I mean, they had the meeting with all the Hindus and the Muslims and the I don't know, there's, whatever else was in all them different religions, and they're just trying to market and push it as much as they can. It's kind of wild to watch this whole thing. Never thought it would go down this way, but this is how it's going down.
I saw a report that said that he had a study done, and they found that a lot of young Catholics were not reading the Bible anymore. And he wanted to try to find a way to entice them to come back and read the Bible. So what he's trying to do, in theory, is to make it more interesting to the young people by bringing in this writer who writes fiction and writes a lot about the occult and things that young people are interested. A lot of young people are fascinated with these days, but they're going to sell the truth.
Yep. So basically, the same thing they've been doing for 1,800 years. Let's add Christmas and Easter and whatever we can do to get the masses involved. Valentine's Day, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. Doesn't matter what it is, how pagan or messed up it is, we're going to insert it to get more people drawn in. They haven't stopped.
Just like when they changed the Ten Commandments.
Yep. Sabbath and everything else.
And it make you realize that prophecy says the whole world, and that may be figurative, but at least a large, significant chunk, are going to worship the man. And the gigantic church leaders that are behind him. And maybe we're going to be moving slowly in that direction, including the young people.
Well, it says I come for the little flock. It doesn't say I come for the church that is 1/4 of the planet. If you read your Bible, it tells you these things. I come for the little flock. And that's got to be us because we're pretty small.
Good point.
We fit the description, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
The thing I was thinking about Valentine's Day is that Valentine's Day seems so innocent. It's all about showing love, giving cards, flowers, chocolates to loved ones. And, what's there not to like? I mean, that's how everybody feels. Maybe you've heard the legend about a saint who saved young romance, and he later became known as Saint Valentine's Day. And so people kind of believe that that's where it came from. By the way, there possibly were 3 different legends, and no one quite sure which one is right. And the Catholic Church is no longer backing either of the 3. So the legend may not even be true. But the main thing is, if you go to Wikipedia and many other sources, the background for Valentine's Day, surprise, surprise, was the pagan city of Rome. And it goes even back before Rome was a world-dominating empire. The Rome, at least the legends of Rome, were that the people who started the Roman Empire were raised by wolves. And that may have something to do with the way this got set, but they had a celebration called Lupercalia, a fertility festival. And the Catholic Church kind of connected that and St. Valentine's on that same day. And like a lot of things in America, the way it worked out was, in the late 1800s, Valentine's Day got the Madison Avenue touch. By that I mean the big department stores and Main Street, small department stores also, discovered there was, and this would even include Jewish merchants too, who didn't believe in it, that there were big bucks to be made from, I think the order of money is like this: Christmas, Halloween, Valentine's Day. Those are the big 3, and I believe it's bigger money-wise than Thanksgiving, Easter, 4th of July. Kind of surprise you, but those are the big 3. They're making a ton of money unless the weather messes things up, tomorrow, off of Valentine's Day. And of course, as Madison Avenue and the marketing machinery of America got bigger and stronger, you just get totally inundated with it on TV and radio and newspapers, and it just seems so innocent. And I was going to ask Gary, if we look at the real roots of Valentine's Day, Gary has some interesting information for us.
Yes, I dug up an article by Mr. Herman Hay. Now, Herman Hay was he was a very prominent teacher and writer for Ambassador College out in California. And one of the characteristics of Mr. Hay was he was a relentless researcher. I've read many of his articles, and he always researched down to every possible thing he could find. And he takes this all the way back to Nimrod and the Babylonian religion. And he says that another translation or another name for Nimrod was Valen, which Valen means different things. One of the things it means that you can translate it to is Cupid. And Cupid can be translated to mean desire, which follows with Nimrod, because he was desirous. He was desired by many women, including his own mother, whom he eventually married. He was known as the one who had the mother wife. Nimrod was also a great hunter, and thereby he was associated with Lupercus. But if you follow all this all the way back, and like I say, he was relentless in his research, Mr. Hay was, and he takes this all the way back to the Babylonian mystery religion and Nimrod. He said Nimrod was the first Valentine.
Interesting, interesting. You can imagine him flexing his muscles or whatever.
He also says that the father of Nimrod was Cush, who was an Ethiopian. Nimrod was mulatto.
Yeah, that's what I was in a class with Dr. Hay. Supposedly proved the same thing. He had to be mixed, half black and white, or somewhere in the middle there. They may not have had the exact same racial names we have today, but I've heard that same thing. And I always think, now this is just me saying it, this is not anything factual. When you think of some pro wrestler like Rock, the Rock, right? That may be what Nimrod looks sort of like, maybe. I'm just guessing.
Or ladies sure seem to like him.
Yeah.
Or not.
Well, his name was Desirous, and he was obviously had a great deal of sexual appeal to have all these women desiring him.
He invented brick and mortar. So he's the one that came up with making brick and mortar. So he wasn't a stupid guy.
Yeah. And the thing about Nimrod, he was if you read it carefully, he was in place of God. He and his religion and their little city empire was meant to get the people's eyes off God and on them instead. They were taking the place of the worship of the true God, and that's the way the world went. So asking the question again, so what's wrong with St. Valentine's Day? Lupercalia, that's from Rome, and then of course it later became the Roman Empire, and then later the Holy Roman Empire, but Lupercalia was the immoral fertility festival, also featuring gluttony, drunkenness. At the end of these gluttonous, drunken festivities, young men would draw a name of a lady from a box. You maybe could call it the Lupercalia Love Lottery. It sounds cute, Lupercalia Love Lottery. Anyway, they draw a lady's name from a box, and the two were considered a sexual pair, an adulterous pair for that year. The festival of Lupercalia is dedicated to the Roman god Pan, recognized as the god of fields, groves, and wooded glens, and pictured as having the hind quarter legs and horns of a goat. And I wonder, you think of the little guy with the bow and arrow on the nymph on Cupid, and you wonder if some of his description didn't come from Pan, which is definitely from the Roman Empire. In other words, this holiday, as innocent as it may be cast today, it has deep pagan roots. It was also, this holiday was connected to fertility, which in the ancient world was you needed kids to work the farm, and you needed fertility of your fields. It was also related to the season of spring. And in more southern areas, not where we are, North America, but more in further south, where Rome is, it could be spring was starting to show itself even by mid-February, I think. And, at least it's possible that was the case. None of what is connected to the feast of Lupercalia is worthy of a Christian observance. I think we'd all agree with that. So let me ask Dave and Ken the question that everybody says, but can a little cute paganism be wrong?
Well, I'm looking up a scripture real quick here. It's Deuteronomy 12 and verse 29. Let me get some eyes on. Let's see if we can't read this. The Lord your God will cut off before you the nations you are about to invade and dispossess. But when you have driven them out and settled in their land, and after they have been destroyed before you, be careful not to be ensnared by inquiring about their gods, saying, how do these nations serve their God? Will we do this? Will we do the same? You must not worship the Lord your God in their way, because in worshiping their gods they do all kinds of detestable things that the Lord hates. They even burn their sons and their daughters in the fire and sacrifice. I had a guy years ago, and he said he basically believed what I believe religious-wise, and I said, really? I mean, you do everything? He goes, yeah, I mean, pretty much. And I said, then how many boogers do I put in your beer before it's too much to drink? And if you look at what God said about these things, look at what happened to Nimrod. He utterly destroyed that nation because of the things they were doing. So, it's how much boogers do I put in your beer before it's too many? And I think the answer is any. So he was not interested in that beer.
A little bit of paganism is sort of like being a little bit pregnant, isn't it?
Right.
Interesting. You think about the city of Babylon. It's one of the few cities in the Bible where God will not allow it to be rebuilt. Saddam Hussein had plans to rebuild the ruins of Babylon as a tourist attraction to get people to go to Iraq. But first he decided to invade Kuwait.
And that's
a true story. True story. So, God just will not let that city it stays ruined. You can go visit the ruins, but God will not let it be rebuilt.
Right. And when I heard him say that, I had just read the scripture where God said that nation would never be a powerful city again or whatever. And I thought, there is a lot of history there. I could see how that idea would work, but it can't possibly work because God wrote in the Bible that it's not going to happen. And sure enough, you take a look at it today.
Yep.
Yeah, that's very true.
This is interesting here. You said that the Romans sometimes referred to Lupercus as Pan. Mr. Hayes says that the Phoenicians and the Semites translated that as Baal. Now, there's a familiar name.
Oh, yeah, that would make sense. The same gods that were back there, they keep showing up again and again. Baal's in the Bible. Baal does mean Lord, or at least he was one of the gods of the ancient world, Baal, and there's some sub-varieties of Baal Pure, and it's and sometimes when you read the Old Testament, when you see Lord, you have to put in Jehovah or Jehovah, because it confuses you. He's saying, this one's Lord and this one's Baal. It'll let you know that one is Jehovah and one is Baal, and God's name and the name of the pagan gods are And it was the pagan gods that had these fertility festivals.
I find it interesting that their religions have many gods because they don't have one that's good enough to do it all. They got all these little weak gods. He's in charge of the field, and he's in charge of the sky, and he's in charge of the. And our God he is in charge of everything.
Yeah, he doesn't need any assistance.
No.
You know, one of the things that God said, he said to not be snared by following pagans. I realize we just read some of that statement just a few minutes ago. He said, when you enter the pagan land of Canaan, don't ask, how do these countries worship their God? God said, don't do that. Don't follow them. But it's almost as if the world has said, in various and sundry ways, let's look at all the cute, and even the current world, all the cute little pagan traditions. They may not call them pagan, but they may call them various other traditions of mankind. And let's, we should honor everything. There's no bad ideas. There's no bad religious ideas. You can get to heaven any way you want to. But that's really not what the Bible says. Don't follow those strange ways.
Right, it was very clear about that. And you look at the other cultures, just like we as Americans look at another culture, can see some things and go, wow, I can't believe that culture does that. So we in the church should be looking at everything, not just culture, but researching why do you do that, and daily searching ourselves.
And that's a big question. Why? Why do they have that date? Why is it on that season? And what is it pointing toward? One of the things that we believe is that if there were no God, if God didn't exist, of course that means we'd just be an accident of nature. This world is too complex for that, but just for the sake of argument, if there were no God, then maybe it wouldn't matter how you worshiped him. You could bring in any pagan idea, any weird thing you want. Maybe some be more harmful than others, but there is a God who lives and who blesses or doesn't bless, and he remembers the horrible things the pagan people did, and probably in some places are still doing on this earth in the name of these pagan gods and on these pagan days, since it reminds God of all those, because God remembers it, even if we don't. We shouldn't celebrate romance on a day that has such a pagan stamp. We should do it some other day, or dates plural.
Right. And here's the thing too is they say, well, we're not doing it for that reason. Whatever reason you're doing it for, it's called selfishness. I'm not doing it for that reason. I'm doing it my way. But it's still selfishness because it's in disobedience. It's what you want over what you're told by God.
Right. And you're still doing it on a pagan day appointed by, paganism. You haven't
you're giving the illusion that you're doing it in paganism because you're doing it on that day.
Right,
It
right.
gives the illusion that you're involved in that paganism, and that's what God hates.
Right. It seems to me, and we talked before the show, and every because we researched this stuff, and it seems that every holiday, other than those spelled out by God in the Bible, except those holy days, can find their roots back to Nimrod and paganism from that time. You can probably trace just about any holy day, any holiday from other world religions and their beliefs back to that same point in time with Nimrod and Semiramis and everything, or derivatives of it.
I agree with that 100%. I may not have any hard evidence to lay down and show you that, but from when you put everything together, it certainly points to that.
And when they get
I haven't seen anything led anywhere else but there so far.
Right.
And a lot of times, once they get the pagan pattern from Babylon the Great religion, as different languages come up, they put different names on it. So you might think it's different, like Ra, the sun god in Egypt, and I think it's Venus in Rome, and different other names for all these various gods and goddesses. But the pattern goes back to Nimrod. It's just different languages. You'd be surprised how similar they are.
It was interesting. The other day I was watching a program, and they were talking about Ho Chi Minh. That was not his real name. He changed his name to Ho Chi Minh, which means Lucifer, the bringer of light.
You're kidding.
No, according to this program I watched.
I didn't know that.
Well, that's interesting.
That'd be an interesting research.
Like Hitler changed his name too. It was Nickel Gruber? Shekel Gruber.
No. He didn't. No, his dad.
Oh, wait a minute.
Not Scheckelgruber. It was his dad's name. His dad was born Scheckelgruber, and his dad, he was illegitimate.
Yeah, illegitimate.
And his dad came back and made him legitimate, and then he had Hitler a few years later. His dad's name was Hitler, and Scheckelgruber, he was almost born Adolf Scheckelgruber, which you don't see a lot of people yelling "Hail Scheckelgruber," I wouldn't think. So you see him standing up there, too many syllables, you know. Hail Scheckelgruber.
You're off on the shekel. You get the second syllable.
Smile when you say Scheckelgruber.
I suppose somebody's named that, and we apologize to them. I feel sorry.
Yes,
for you.
yes.
We were having
get a lot of viewership in Germany, actually. So
yeah, I know this is a bit of an aside, but let's mention it because it's funny. Ken, would you tell them about the lady who called into this radio talk show, and she was complaining about where they put the deer crossing signs? Could you explain that, Ken?
I posted it on Facebook, so if you're on my friends list, you may have clicked on it, or if you go to it later if you see it on my page. But it's been around the web a few times. You may have gotten it in an email, but it's just we were talking about it, and it was just a woman who said that she's had 3 accidents by the deer crossing sign, and she thinks the state needs to move that because the deer are crossing in a bad spot, and they need to move it out in the country somewhere where it's not so much population, so the deer cross out there. And she is dead serious. I could play it for you, but you just look it up on YouTube. Radio show deer crossing, or woman calls in the radio show deer crossing. You'll get it.
And then she said it's irresponsible for the state to be putting these deer crossing signs in heavy traffic areas. They should put the deer crossing signs and school crossing where they have crossing guards and stuff.
It's hilarious. Yeah, it's hilarious. I thought the funniest part for me when I was playing it was you fell out of your chair. That was hilarious.
Well, you gotta laugh when you cry these days.
It's scary because you're out on the road with them same people. I see them every day. Trust me, I know.
Anyway, but getting back to Valentine's Day, there's a lot of paganism there, and God resents it. One scripture that might be of interest is Ezekiel. Let's see. Ezekiel 10. I think it's Ezekiel 10:16, if I've got it correct. Ezekiel is being told something, I assume in some kind of vision from God, and how Ezekiel 8:16, and how upset God is. And so you put it in that context. I'll start at verse 15. There are a number of things there that God doesn't like. Various pagan imagery right there in the temple courtyard, etc. And then it said, and then verse 15 says, let's go to verse 14. That might be worth throwing in there too. 13. I'll start in 13. Ezekiel 8:13. And he said unto me, turn you yet again, and you shall see greater abominations that they do. Then they brought me to the door of the gate. And this is the Lord's house. That means the temple in Jerusalem, which women weeping for Tammuz. That's another name for Semiramis. And what are some of the other Greek names for her?
Ishtar.
Oh, Tammuz is the boy. Yeah, he's one of the Trinity. He's the Greek Adonis. Tammuz is, it says in my margin, the Greek Adonis. Tammuz. So maybe as the Greek Adonis, that may actually go back to Nimrod. Then he said unto me, these are people weeping for him at the temple of God. Have you seen this, O son of man? Turn you yet again, and you shall see greater abomination than these. Then he brought me into the inner court of the Lord's house. This is the holy place, that first room, the holy place. And behold, at the door of the temple of the Lord, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men with their backs toward the temple of God, I guess in the opening of the holy room, their faces toward the east, and they worship the sun toward the east. So if you want to know what God thinks about sunrise worship, he calls it an abomination. It's straight out of sun worship. It's as pagan as it can get. And these things upset God. So if we want to be close to God and have God's favor, we need to do the opposite. Use God's holy days for worship and not man's, which are influenced by paganism. And I'm sure the devil's behind all that too.
Yeah, and if you keep on reading, verse 17, he said to me, have you seen this, son of man? Is this a trivial matter for the house of Judah to do the detestable things that they are doing? Must they also fill the land with violence and continually provoke me to anger? Look at them putting the branch to their nose. They were simply bowing towards the sun, and he said it was detestable, and that it made him angry.
Yeah, and we don't want to do anything to make God angry. We want God to bless us, if at all possible. So the last thing we want to do is make God angry. And here's something, this is 22:26, not as dramatic as that verse, but it says, and the priests have violated my laws, and they profane my holy things, and they put no difference between the holy and the profane. Neither have they shown any difference between the unclean and the clean, and have hid their eyes from my Sabbaths, and that means holy days when it's plural, and I am profaned among them. And it's almost like the world has moved away from God's Sabbaths and his holy days, and we don't see the difference between things that are holy and things that are not holy.
Yeah, I was in the store a few years ago. It was Passover time, and I was looking at matzos and stuff, and there's a lady behind me. She was cooking pork, and she looked at me and says, would you like to have a sample? And I said, I'm buying matzos, and no. And she got very upset with me. She said, my husband's Jewish, and he eats pork. And I'm like, okay. And I told that story to my son, and he says, your answer, Dad, should have been, wow, so he's doing it wrong. And
That's true.
People ask me about, they associate Hanukkah with Christmas. They think it's Jewish Christmas. And it has nothing to do with Christmas.
Well, I thought you had a Hanukkah tree this year.
Last year I did.
Oh, okay, that was last year.
I had people apologizing to me. Sorry, we forgot that you're Jewish, and Happy Hanukkah, and it just went on and on. All these people, they were afraid that they'd offended me. I think I walked in my school one day, and he bowed to me and yelled "Shalom."
Semiramis was also referred to as the Queen of Heaven.
Yes.
It says
Yeah, I was looking at that too, yeah.
On February 14th, she was purified, and to have appeared for the first time in public with her son as the original mother-child. I've heard that the Catholic Church and the way they present Mary, the mother of Jesus, is the way that Semiramis would have been presented.
So the Queen of Heaven was on February the 14th?
Yes, she was purified on February 14th.
Interesting to note, the obelisk in the Vatican City, in the center of the city, under it is the symbol for the Queen of Heaven, and the obelisk is right in the center of that, pointing straight up. Interesting facts, because I see that symbol on, I think the Presbyterians use that symbol a lot. The sunburst symbol.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is very interesting.
They also teach that Mary was a virgin birth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of the other names, there's some common names applied to her, to Semiramis, in different, Greek and Roman in their religion. There's Venus, Aphrodite,
Yes,
Artemis, Athena. I mean, it goes on. Hera, Juno, Vesta, there's Ray, Ra, Ray. There's a bunch of them, but yeah, symbol of fertile earth, the goddess of this, the wife and sister of Kronos. It just goes on and on and on. It's all pagan.
You remember that part in the book of Acts where Paul has gotten a large group of people down to throw away their pagan idols and their books of the occult. And so the idol people are starting to worry about their business, and they run around screaming, "Great is Diana of the Ephesians," or Artemis, depending on which translation you get. Isn't Artemis the other one? Diana of the Ephesians. But that's basically Aphrodite or Venus, or those are all similar names. And apparently they screamed it for 2 hours, thousands of people, because they were afraid of the growth of Christianity and people deserting the worship of Aphrodite, the Queen of Heaven, and she was also the goddess of fertility. Isn't it interesting that now much of the world, indirectly through St. Valentine's Day and other days, are still kind of worshiping Aphrodites?
A lot of people don't know that Cortez delivered a statue of Mary, there what they call Mary, into South America, and he painted her black and named her Our Lady of Guadalupe. It's the same statue.
You know, I worked in our store this morning here, the Rite Aid Pharmacy. One fellow came in and spent $125 on Valentines and candy and flowers and other junk to take home to his wife or his girlfriend or whoever it was. $125 he laid down.
Really? And if he'd have just waited, if he'd have just waited 36 or 48 hours, he could have got it all for $60.
Yeah, Monday.
See, that's the only benefit about these pagan holidays is half off candy for the rest of us.
Yeah, if you like, chocolate eggs or marshmallow coated chocolate eggs, just wait a few days after all this. Going to come down in price.
And they'll give it to
especially
you.
after Easter.
Sunday, if you can get out of your house and your car isn't frozen to the ground, and you can make it to your local store, you can get everything for half price.
I've seen some of it go in the dumpster.
Uh-oh.
Okay. Have we? Did we cover everything we meant to cover?
Yeah,
I think so.
Let's see. By the way, I might just mention if people have ideas for topics in the Bible that you like covered, you maybe could email those to Ken, and we'll think about it, and maybe we can cover them in the future. What do we have down for next week, honey? Can you pass me that?
Yeah, absolutely. We can use all the ideas. If you want to go back to the YouTube page and scroll through some of the topics we've touched on already, and you can find something. We may have to get into some more specific topics. We've done that a couple of times, and they were pretty good. I mean, we covered a very short section of the Bible, but it was made for a really good in-depth study on that. So if you can come up with something else, let us know, and we'd be happy to look at it.
And here's, in addition to what Ken said about new topics, if there's a topic we've covered in the past and you like us to look into it more deeply, we might try that. I had this series of educational lectures with historian expert on the Hitler era. Well, they've now come up with a new set of things where they went more deeply into Hitler and the men around him, and what others did and didn't do. And it's amazing how you can take the same 1930s, well, actually go back to the 1920s when they first started, and 30s, and you can look at it more deeply and find a lot more interesting things in addition to what you said the first time. And I found that quite eye-opening. So even a topic that we've covered in the past, we might be able to, like an onion, unravel some additional parts to it. Like next week, we're going to talk about exploring the Antichrist, and it's plural because obviously people in place of the real Christ. As soon as the church got its momentum going, the devil started, doing things to get false prophets in and the Antichrist. But then, of course, there's the big one coming in the end. And I do think it's still a topic, even though we know about it, it's still one that we maybe could look at so that when it happens, we can all say, now I know, I've been thinking about it, and now I see how it's going to come down. Because we'll be focused on it, so when it does happen, we'll be ready for it.
Yep, sounds good.
So that's the Antichrist next weekend.
All right.
Yep. Well, if we don't have anything else you want to cover, we can end the program. Jane, we thank you for you got your jokes. I copied them and sent them along to James, so he'll get those and take a look at those for you. That was pretty good, the ones you sent, though. So if that's it, anything else we want to cover? One little quick thing. Did anybody see the blurb on CNN about I forget what his name is. I'd have to look it up, but he was having a conversation or arguing. He's supposed to be a journalist, but he was arguing with a judge about the judge. He said, "Our rights do not come from God." Did you see that?
I did.
You did see that? But anyway, he said, I forget what he was arguing about. I think it was gay marriage, which is about to be just about everywhere. And I'd have to look real quick to bring up that article, or to share it real quick in case you haven't seen it. Let's see here. I think I posted that this morning. Let's see.
It's Judge Moore.
Yeah, CNN anchor. Here we go. I got to get his name here. But if you want to look it up, it's on WorldNet Daily as well. And let's see, his name. He was Chris Cuomo. So Mayor Cuomo's son, I think, is who this is. And they were arguing over same-sex marriage, and what he said was that American rights do not come from God; they come from man. How ignorant can you be? I guess you can be pretty ignorant and get your face on TV and get paid a paycheck for that. But that was something. If you want to look that up, that's what was stated. So that's where this country's gone to.
And that's in contradiction to the founding fathers, because when you read, the foundations for the Constitution, it was man is endowed by his creator, and well, you all know the rest of that statement, inalienable rights, but they said creator, that's God, which is, how logical can you be?
My younger brother, he was probably in third grade or something, and a teacher was explaining evolution, on a third grader's level, and he raised his hand and he says, how long does it take for people to evolve? And she said, millions of years. He said, how long does it take for a typewriter to evolve? She says, they can't evolve, those have to be made. And he said, but my mind can just evolve, my knowledge and my taste, and she had no answer for him.
There wasn't.
Of course not.
There isn't an answer.
No.
I'm talking third grade or something.
He's atheist.
She didn't. She wasn't complaining about a deer crossing sign, was she?
These atheists
Oh, was
are
her hair color?
more emboldened in what they in making these statements publicly. There was a time when he wouldn't have said that.
Right, right. You know, that's something we need to keep in mind when sometimes we may, if, make sure that I know it's a problem I have too, but we need to make sure that we check our facts out too. We can make mistakes just like anybody else, but not that kind of mistake, obviously, but we don't want to fall into that kind of, get that kind of reputation or being known for that out in the world. We got to check ourselves.
We want to get into the Brian Williams syndrome.
Yes, we don't want to do that at all. There's so many funny memes out there about Brian Williams. Oh, it's hilarious. All right, gentlemen.
Yeah. He's made the cover of the National Enquirer. You know you've got it made when a bad photo of you gets on the cover of the National Enquirer.
That's when you fit the big time.
Yeah, he said something. All right. Well, we thank everyone for watching. I get your notes and I get your comments on the channel. I really appreciate that. And we thank you all for listening and spending this cold Sabbath. Well, I guess cold is relative, but where I'm at, it's cold. Cold Sabbath with us, and we hope everyone has a great rest of your Sabbath. And good night, everybody.
Good night.
By the way, guys, that article was from Tomorrow's World, February 1970 issue.
Wow, so that's not that old.
No, you can probably find it.
No, I don't consider 1970 old.
I was going to say, did you just say not that old?
I
1970?
I guess never mind. Now, people said 1957, I said old, but I remember 1970. Never.
On that note.
Yes, you all weren't even born then, right?
We're happy you could make it, and so glad you are here, and hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.
The soundtrack sounds like the Allman Brothers.
Seek the King Rune, everybody, and good night.
Good night.
Right.